the car my family stole from me, and the truth my grandfather discovered. The first thing my grandfather asked when I stepped out of the taxi was the last thing I wanted to hear. Why did you come here in a taxi? I froze beside the curb. He looked past me toward the street, then back at me. What happened to the SUV I gave you? Before I could answer, my mother appeared behind him. She smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not an apologetic one. The kind of smile people use when they already have a story prepared. She doesn't have it anymore, Dad, my mother said. My grandfather's expression changed. My mother continued calmly. We gave it to Tessa. I watched my grandfather's hand tighten around the edge of the door. And suddenly I understood something. He had never agreed to that. Neither had I. And by the time that evening ended, my family was going to learn that the quiet daughter they had been using for years had finally started keeping records. My name is Nora. I'm 27 years old. And I run a small handmade stationery business from a rented studio in Denver, Colorado. I design wedding invitations, holiday cards, custom journals, and hand-painted keepsake boxes. It isn't a glamorous business. My studio has uneven floors. The radiator makes strange noises. There is always paper dust on my clothes. And somehow, no matter how carefully I clean, tiny pieces of ribbon and glitter follow me home. But I love it. Every order has something personal in it. A name, a date, a message someone wants another person to remember. I make things that are meant to last. Maybe that's why I spent so long believing my family would eventually learn to value me. My mother, Diane, always described me as the dependable one. It sounded nice when I was younger. You can always count on Nora. She never causes trouble. She knows how to handle things. But in my family, dependable eventually became another word for available. If a bill needed to be paid, I was asked. If someone needed a favor, I was asked. If my younger sister needed help, I was expected to provide it. My sister, Tessa, was 23 and trying to build a career as a lifestyle creator online. She had thousands of followers and a talent for making ordinary things look expensive. My mother adored it. She called Tessa the face of the family. I never understood what that meant. Until I realized that Tessa was allowed to be visible while I was expected to be useful. My father, Martin, rarely argued with my mother. He loved us. I know he did. But whenever Diane became emotional, he became silent. And whenever Tessa wanted something, he somehow became even quieter. The only person who never treated me like a resource was my grandfather, Walter. Years earlier, when my business was still just a folding table at weekend markets, he watched me struggle to transport boxes of invitations, frames, paper, and supplies across town. One afternoon, he said, "You need a vehicle." I laughed. "I need customers. You need both." A few weeks later, he handed me the keys to a nearly new SUV. It wasn't flashy. It was practical. Large trunk. Reliable. Safe. He had chosen it because it could carry my equipment. "It's yours," he said. I hugged him. My mother took a photograph of us. Later that evening, she said something I should have paid more attention to. Everything stays in the family. At the time, I thought she meant that she was proud of me. I was wrong. Because gradually, the car stopped being treated like mine. Tessa borrowed it for a weekend. Then another. Then she needed it for a photo shoot. Then for a brand event. Then for meetings. My mother always had an explanation. "You barely drive. You work from your studio. Tessa actually needs transportation. It's only temporary." I kept accepting those explanations. Until one morning, I went downstairs and discovered the keys were gone. Again, I called my mother. "Mom, I need the SUV today. I have 3 deliveries." She sighed. "Tessa has it." "For how long?" "I don't know. I really need it." "Nora, you can use a rideshare." I stared at the wall. "A rideshare isn't going to fit 6 boxes. You can make 2 trips." I wanted to argue. Instead, I said, "Okay." That was always my mistake. I said okay, over and over, until temporary became permanent. So when I arrived at Grandpa Walter's house in a taxi that winter afternoon, I already knew something was wrong. He just didn't know how wrong. He stepped aside. "Come inside." I carried a box of finished invitations against my chest. Tessa was sitting in the dining room. A small camera was mounted on a tripod. Her phone was recording. She smiled when she saw me. "Hey." My mother came behind her. "You made it." Grandpa looked at me. "What happened to the car?" I took a breath. Before I could answer, Diane spoke. "She doesn't have it anymore." Grandpa looked at her. "What does that mean?" It means Tessa needed it. So? So she has it now. The room went silent. Grandpa looked at me. Nora? I opened my mouth. But Tessa spoke first. Honestly, Grandpa, it makes sense. Nora works from a studio. I'm constantly traveling for work. Grandpa's eyes narrowed. Did Nora give you the car? Tessa hesitated. My mother stepped in. We discussed it as a family. I almost laughed. No, I said quietly. My mother looked at me. What? I didn't agree to give her the car. The room changed. Tessa stopped smiling. Diane's face tightened. Nora, don't make this dramatic. I'm not. You know how important Tessa's work is? I know how important mine is. My mother rolled her eyes. You've always been overly sensitive about money. Grandpa said nothing. He simply looked at me. And for the first time, I saw that he wasn't confused anymore. He was listening. Really listening. That night, after dinner, I returned to my apartment in another rideshare. I didn't cry. I waited until I reached my studio. Then I turned on the single lamp above my work table. The room was dark except for that small circle of light. I sat down. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. How much had I actually given my family? I opened my banking app. At first, I was only looking for the car-related expenses. Then I noticed something else. A payment to an advertising company. I didn't recognize it. Then another. Then another. I opened the details. They were connected to Tessa's social media business. I checked the previous months. More payments. I checked my credit card. More delivery charges. Subscriptions. Promotional campaigns. Restaurant bills. A hotel. I started making a list. Then another. By midnight, I had almost $9,000 of expenses I had never knowingly approved. I stared at the total. $8,042. My hands went cold. The money wasn't just money. It represented materials I could have bought, rent I had struggled to cover, equipment I had postponed buying, orders I had turned down because I thought I couldn't afford the supplies. For years, I had been telling myself my business was barely surviving because I wasn't working hard enough. But the numbers told another story. My business wasn't failing. My family had been draining it. I opened a spreadsheet. I entered every transaction. Date, amount, description, who benefited, whether I had approved it. I checked everything twice. Then I printed the entire file. At 2:17 in the morning, my phone buzzed. Grandpa, a single message appeared. Come tomorrow morning. We need to talk. I stared at it. Then I looked at the stack of papers beside me. For years, I had been afraid of confrontation. That night, I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was prepared. Grandpa Walter's house was warm the next morning, but something about it felt different. He had cleared the dining table. 2 folders were waiting there. I recognized one immediately. Mine. The second was thick, old, and completely unfamiliar. Grandpa poured 2 cups of coffee. Sit. I sat. He opened my folder. He read every page. Slowly, without interruption. When he finished, he placed his glasses on the table. This isn't a misunderstanding. I swallowed. No. This is a pattern. That word hit harder than I expected. Pattern. Because I had spent years treating every incident as an isolated event. 1 borrowed car, 1 unpaid bill, 1 emergency, 1 favor, 1 temporary expense, 1 more request, 1 more sacrifice. But when you put them all together, they stopped looking like accidents. They became a system. Grandpa opened the second folder. These are my records. I looked at him. Records of what? Family finances. He pulled out several documents. I started keeping copies years ago because I didn't trust Diane's bookkeeping. I stared at him. She doesn't know? No. He paused. I wanted to believe I was being overly cautious. He pushed 1 page toward me. It turns out I wasn't. I looked at the documents. There were records of money my grandfather had given my parents over the years. Education funds, emergency payments, contributions toward Tessa's expenses, and something else, a family investment account. Grandpa had been saving money for his grandchildren. He had planned to divide it between us. He looked at me. I've changed my mind. I didn't understand. About what? About where that money goes. I shook my head. Grandpa, I don't want to take anything from Tessa. You aren't taking anything. He closed the folder. I'm deciding what happens to my money. I looked down. He continued. Your family has been treating your income as communal property. My eyes burned. I allowed it. No. I looked up. You allowed yourself to survive it, he said. There was a difference. Then he leaned back. They're coming here at 10. My stomach tightened. Why? Because we're going to talk. I almost laughed. My mother isn't going to like that. I know. At exactly 10, the doorbell rang. Diane arrived first. Perfect hair, perfect coat, perfect expression. My father followed. He looked nervous. Tessa entered last. She was holding her phone. What's going on? Grandpa pointed toward the chairs. Sit. Diane frowned. Dad, you could have just called. No. He placed the folders on the table. You wouldn't have listened. She glanced at me. Then at the papers. What is this? Grandpa answered. An accounting. Diane laughed nervously. Of what? Everything Nora has paid for this family. The room went quiet. My father looked at me. Tessa crossed her arms. Diane smiled. Oh, please. Grandpa didn't react. He handed her the first page. You charged Nora's business card for Tessa's advertising campaign. Diane glanced at the paper. That was family promotion. She didn't authorize it. She knew about it. I spoke. No, I didn't. Diane turned toward me. Nora, don't do this. Grandpa raised his hand. Let her speak. That sentence almost broke me. Let her speak. Such simple words. Yet I realized how rarely anyone had said them to me. I took a breath. I found more than $8,000. Diane's expression changed. That's impossible. I slid the spreadsheet across the table. She looked down. Tessa leaned over. Her face became pale. I didn't know about some of these. Grandpa looked at her. But you benefited from them. Tessa didn't answer. He continued. The vehicle was given to Nora for her business. Diane shook her head. We thought it was more useful for Tessa. Did Nora agree? Diane looked at me. You've always been difficult when it comes to sharing. I stared at her. Sharing what? Family resources. I almost smiled. My business isn't a family resource. Silence. My income isn't family money. Tessa spoke. You're acting like I stole from you. You used my car. You weren't using it. You used my money. I never asked you to pay for everything. No, I said. You didn't have to. That stopped her. I continued, because Mom always asked for you. Diane stood. This is ridiculous. Grandpa's voice remained calm. No, Diane, what's ridiculous is watching one child carry the entire family, while everyone calls it cooperation. My father finally spoke. Maybe we should all calm down. Grandpa turned toward him. Martin, did you know? My father looked down. Some of it. Did you stop it? He didn't answer. Grandpa nodded. That is an answer. Diane's eyes filled with anger. Dad, you're turning against your own family. Grandpa shook his head. I'm protecting the person you should have protected yourselves. He opened the second folder. There is another matter. Diane froze. Grandpa explained that the investment account he had, established for his grandchildren, would no longer be divided equally. I intended to give each of you an equal amount. He looked at Tessa. But money given without responsibility becomes another tool for dependency. Then he looked at me. Nora will receive the entire amount. Diane's mouth fell open. That isn't fair, Grandpa replied. Fairness would have been letting Nora keep what belonged to her in the first place. Tessa looked at me. You're really taking it? I shook my head. I'm not taking anything. Grandpa said. She isn't. He signed a document. I am choosing where my money goes. Then he looked directly at me. Use it to build something no one can take away from you. My throat tightened. I looked at my mother. I don't want to fight with you. She laughed bitterly. That's what you're doing. No. I looked at her. This is the first time I'm refusing to fight myself. She stared at me. I continued. I am done paying your bills. I am done funding Tessa's business. I am done giving up my car because somebody else needs it more. And I am done feeling guilty because I have boundaries. Diane's face hardened. You're ungrateful. Grandpa stepped between us. No. His voice was quiet. You raised her to be responsible. He looked at my mother. Not disposable. Nobody spoke. Then he turned to me. The keys are coming back today. Tessa looked away. For the first time, she didn't argue. And when I walked outside that afternoon, my grandfather handed me the keys. I held them in my palm. They were just keys, Metal, small, ordinary, but they felt heavier than anything I had carried in years. Because for the first time, something that had been given to me was actually mine. The next few weeks were strangely peaceful. Not happy, not easy, just quiet. I signed a lease on a brighter studio on the edge of Denver. It had huge windows, a clean wooden floor, a small storage room, and enough space for me to work without stacking boxes beside the heater. I used part of Grandpa's money for equipment, a better printer, new shelving, a proper cutting table, a security system, things I had postponed for years because I was always worried about what would happen if I spent too much. This time I didn't ask anyone. I simply bought what my business needed. The first morning I opened the new studio, Grandpa arrived with coffee. He looked around. Better. I smiled. Much better. He noticed a crooked shelf. You still can't hang anything straight. I laughed. Some things never change. He smiled. Then he left me to work. That was Grandpa. He didn't need to be the hero every minute. He just showed up. Meanwhile, my mother started texting. At first, the messages were angry. You embarrassed me. Then, we are still family. Then, you have changed. I didn't know how to answer that one, because she was right. I had changed. But not in the way she meant. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I had simply stopped volunteering for things that hurt me. When she asked for money, I said no. When she asked to borrow the SUV, I said no. When she asked me to help with one of Tessa's projects, I said I was busy. Every no felt uncomfortable. Then easier. Then normal. Tessa was different. She didn't apologize immediately. Instead, she disappeared for several weeks. Then one afternoon, she came to my studio. I was painting tiny winter houses. She stood near the doorway. Can I come in? I nodded. She looked around. It's nice. Thank you. She walked toward a shelf. There were dozens of finished pieces. She picked up a small ornament shaped like a vintage camera. You made this? Yes. It's good. I smiled. Thanks. She put it down. Then she reached into her purse. She placed cash on the counter. I looked at her. What is that? I want the camera ornament. You don't have to pay. Yes, I do. I didn't argue. She picked it up. Then she stood there quietly. Finally, she said, I didn't realize. I knew what she meant. You didn't realize what? How much Mom was taking from you. I looked down. She continued, I thought you were okay. I know. You always said you were fine. I learned to. She looked at me. I think I was selfish. I didn't tell her she wasn't. Because she had been. But she was also young. And I had spent too many years trying to explain other people's behavior for them. So I simply said, we're both learning. She nodded. Then she left. It wasn't an apology big enough to fix our childhood, but it was honest. And sometimes honesty is the first thing that makes a relationship possible. My father was harder. He called one evening. I owe you an apology. I sat down. For what? For letting your mother decide everything. I didn't answer. He sighed. I knew you were paying for things. I closed my eyes. Why didn't you say anything? I was afraid of conflict. I laughed softly. That doesn't make it okay. I know. There was silence. Then he said, I should have protected you. That sentence stayed with me, because I had wanted to hear it for years. But when it finally came, it didn't magically erase anything. It simply gave the past its correct name. Failure, not misunderstanding, not bad timing, not family complexity. Failure. I told him I appreciated his honesty, but I needed time. He said he understood. For once, he didn't ask me to forgive him immediately. That mattered. Months passed. My studio grew. Orders increased. A local boutique started carrying my work. Then a wedding planner contacted me. Then another. I hired a part-time assistant. I started teaching small workshops. I became busier than I had ever been. But this time, busy didn't mean exhausted. Because the work was finally building my life instead of financing someone else's. One evening, I locked the studio and sat in my SUV, the same vehicle Grandpa had given me years earlier. I placed both hands on the steering wheel. I thought about all the ride shares, all the deliveries I had struggled through, all the times I had asked permission to use my own car. I laughed. Then I drove home. For the first time, I understood that boundaries weren't about shutting people out. They were about deciding who was allowed to walk into your life without taking something when they left. And I was finally learning how to decide. The hardest part wasn't taking my money back. It was watching my mother tell everyone that I had become selfish. She called relatives. She explained the situation. But her version was different. According to Diane, I had become obsessed with money. According to Diane, Grandpa had been manipulated. According to Diane, Tessa had been treated unfairly. According to Diane, our family had always shared everything. But there was one problem. The numbers existed. The transactions existed. The dates existed. The car existed. And Grandpa had copies of everything. She could change the story. She couldn't change the evidence. Still, some relatives believed her. One aunt called me. I heard there was a big argument. Yes. Your mother is very upset. I know. She says you won't help the family anymore. I won't. There was a long pause. Then she said, maybe you could meet her halfway. I looked around my studio. At the shelves, the orders, the equipment, the life I had almost lost. What's halfway? She didn't answer, because there wasn't one. Halfway meant giving up another piece of myself. I had spent years doing that. I wasn't going back. Then something unexpected happened. Grandpa invited the entire family to his house again. This time there was no dinner. No celebration. No decorations. Just a meeting. Diane arrived angry. Tessa came quietly. My father looked exhausted. Grandpa placed one folder on the table. He didn't open it. He simply said, I want everyone to understand something. He looked at my mother. Money is not love. Diane crossed her arms. I never said it was. You acted like it. He looked at Tessa. Giving someone everything doesn't make them successful. Then he looked at me. And asking one child to sacrifice everything doesn't make the family strong. Nobody moved. Grandpa continued. I am not choosing Nora because she is my favorite. Diane looked at him. Then why? Because she has demonstrated responsibility. He pointed toward my business records. She built something. Then he pointed toward the expenses. She was supporting something else. Tessa lowered her eyes. Grandpa turned to all of us. From today forward, no one gets access to Nora's money. Accounts, vehicle, business, or personal information without her explicit permission. My mother laughed. She's our daughter, and that is exactly why you should have known better. Silence. I looked at my mother. I don't want you out of my life. She looked surprised. But I need you to understand that being my mother doesn't give you ownership of me. Her face changed. I continued. You don't get to decide what happens to my money. You don't get to decide who drives my car. You don't get to decide whether my work is important. And you don't get to call me selfish because I finally noticed what was happening. My mother looked away. Then she said something I never expected. I didn't think you cared that much. I stared at her. That sentence told me everything. All those years, all those assumptions, all that damage. She genuinely believed that because I didn't complain loudly, I didn't care. I answered softly. I cared so much that I kept sacrificing myself. She didn't respond. Grandpa did. And that's over. The meeting ended without hugs, without dramatic apologies, without everyone suddenly becoming a perfect family. But something important had happened. The rules had changed. And this time, I had been part of writing them. A few months later, my mother sent me a message. I don't know how to fix what I did. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote, You can't fix the past, but you can stop repeating it. She replied, What does that mean? I thought about it, then answered, It means when I say no, you accept it. When I say something belongs to me, you believe me. And when you don't understand my decision, you ask instead of deciding for me. She didn't answer immediately. Hours later, one message appeared. Okay, I'll try. It wasn't perfect, but it was the first time she had accepted a boundary without arguing, and that was enough for that day. A year later, my business was bigger than I had ever imagined. I had a real storefront, 3 employees, orders from across the country, my own website, a small workshop space where people came to learn, and on the wall behind my desk hung a photograph of Grandpa, Walter handing me the keys to my first SUV. The photograph was old. The colors had faded, but I kept it. Not because of the car, because of what it represented. Someone had looked at me and seen potential before I knew how to see it myself. One afternoon, Grandpa came into the shop. He looked around. You did all this? I smiled. We did. He shook his head. No. He pointed at me. You did. I laughed. Fine. He sat down. For a while, we watched customers move through the shop. Then he asked, Do you still think about what happened? Sometimes. Does it still hurt? I thought carefully. Yes. He nodded. Good. I looked at him. Good? It means you remember. He paused. Just don't let remembering become living there. I smiled. I won't. After he left, I stood alone in the middle of the store. The lights were warm. The shelves were full. The air smelled like pine and fresh paper. Everything around me had once existed only as an idea, a better studio, a stable business, a life where I didn't have to ask permission to use what I had earned. I thought about the taxi ride to Grandpa's house, the cold, his question, my mother's voice. She doesn't have the car anymore. For a long time, I thought that moment was when everything fell apart. Now I understand. It was when everything finally became clear. The car wasn't the real problem. The money wasn't the real problem. Even Tessa wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that my family had confused my kindness with consent. They thought because I didn't fight, I agreed. Because I was quiet, I was fine. Because I was responsible, I could carry more. Because I loved them, they could keep taking. And I had helped them believe it. Not because I was weak. Because I had been taught that keeping the peace was more important than protecting myself. It took me years to understand that peace without boundaries isn't peace. It's exhaustion. My relationship with Tessa eventually became better. Not perfect, but honest. She stopped asking for free work. She stopped assuming I would pay. Sometimes she bought things from my shop. Sometimes she sent customers my way. Once she told me, "You know what the weirdest part is?" "What?" "I used to think you were the lucky one because Grandpa always trusted you." I laughed. "And now?" "Now I think you were the only one willing to become responsible for yourself." I didn't know what to say, so I hugged her. My father and I also rebuilt something, slowly. He still struggled with conflict. But now, when my mother asked him to pressure me into something, he didn't. He said no. That small change mattered more than any speech. My mother and I remained complicated. There were good days. There were difficult days. Sometimes we went weeks without talking. But she learned something. When I said no, she stopped. When I said I was busy, she didn't demand an explanation. When I said something belonged to me, she didn't say, "But we're family." And slowly, the word family stopped sounding like a threat. One evening, I locked the shop. I walked outside. My SUV was parked beneath a street lamp. I held the keys in my hand. The same keys Grandpa had given me years earlier. I thought about how easily they had disappeared from my life, how casually everyone had decided the car belonged to someone else. Then I looked at my shop. My name was above the door. My business was inside. My life was waiting for me. And I realized something. My grandfather hadn't really given me a car. He had given me proof. Proof that something could belong to me. Proof that I was allowed to have something without apologizing for it. Proof that I could build something and protect it. And eventually, I learned to give myself the same permission. I don't hate my mother. I don't hate Tessa. I don't even hate my father for being afraid of conflict. But I don't excuse them anymore. There's a difference between forgiveness and pretending. I can forgive someone and still keep my door locked. I can love someone and still say no. I can understand why someone behaved badly without allowing them to behave badly again. And I can call someone family without handing them the keys to my life. That's what I learned. Not how to get revenge. Not how to make my family regret what they did. Something better. How to stop abandoning myself just to keep everyone else comfortable. My old records are still saved. The spreadsheet. The payments. The dates. The evidence. I don't look at them often, but I keep them. Not because I'm angry. Because they remind me that when I finally stopped trusting explanations and started looking at facts, I found the truth. And the truth gave me my life back. Sometimes people ask me what I would have done if Grandpa hadn't stepped in. I don't know. Maybe I would have stayed quiet longer. Maybe I would have kept paying. Maybe I would have kept calling every sacrifice family. But I know this now. At some point, I would have had to choose myself. Because there comes a moment when being the reliable person becomes dangerous. Not because reliability is bad, but because people who benefit from your reliability may never notice when you're drowning. So if you're always the one everyone calls, if you're always the one who pays, if you're always the one who understands, if everyone assumes you'll be fine because you've always been fine, please remember this. Being capable doesn't mean you have to carry everyone. Being generous doesn't mean everything you own belongs to other people. Being a good daughter doesn't mean sacrificing your future. And saying no doesn't make you selfish. Sometimes no is the first complete sentence you give yourself. My grandfather once told me that if I wanted something to last, I had to build it on solid ground. For years, I thought he was talking about my business. He wasn't. He was talking about me. And now, every time I lock the doors of my shop at night, I think about that cold afternoon when I arrived at his house in a taxi. I remember the question. What happened to the SUV? I remember my mother's answer. She gave it to her sister. And I remember the feeling that came afterward. Not defeat. Not anger. Clarity. Because that was the day I finally understood that if I didn't protect what was mine, someone else would always decide where it belonged. Today my car is parked outside my shop. My business is mine. My money is mine. My time is mine. My voice is mine. And my life is finally mine. Grandpa gave me the keys, but I was the one who finally learned how to hold on to them. And that was worth far more than any car.